Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, as we like to say on this program. Welcome to everyone. My name is Alex Tullio. I'm the CEO of Financial Executive Women, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Mick Philippou, who's the CEO of Sandstone Technology. And together, we are very excited to bring you the latest episode of a Digital First, a Banking Transformation series. Mick, as always, so good to see you. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Alex. All things considering that we're working within the 5-kilometre radius in terms of the lockdown restrictions, but it's a wonderful day here in sunny Sydney, first day of spring, and obviously back with yourself talking all things digital transformation. So I think we'll jump straight into it. I really need to introduce this guest because I've just looked at his biography, and I think we're going to need about 5 to 10 minutes to indulge a little bit as we just walk it through. So today, as Alex, we always say it, we've got another wonderful guest, a thought leader in all things banking and digital transformation. This gentleman, we have to go across the Tasman to invite this gentleman to our program today, which is terrific. But Mark McLean, he's a chartered accountant. He holds a Bachelor of Commerce as well as a diploma in marketing. He's a financial services industry background spanning more than 25 years. He's held various executive leadership roles in the UK, Singapore, Netherlands, and New Zealand. He's been a valued member of SBS Bank's executive team for the past 10 years, having responsibility for the bank's risk process improvement functions as the Chief Risk Officer and more recently as the General Manager for Member Experience. As the General Manager for Member Experience, Mark is responsible for the member experience and sales aspects of business through SBS branches, digital channel, contact centre and the broker distribution channel. Mark also holds a number of directorships, including Finance Now Limited and Razor New South Wales Limited. Mark McLean, welcome to the program. Tell us, where did it all start?
Okay, welcome Mick and also to Alex. Great to be here from this side of the Tasman. Where did it all start? Well, that was such a, big introduction. I'm not too sure what part to start on that, but for me, I guess my career in banking started really after time with a chartered accounting firm with Deloitte. When I was seconded over to the UK and started getting some exposure to some big investment banking clients, and that's where I really got a really strong taste for the financial services industry, and as a result of that, jumped ship and got into banking. Mate.
I love that, such an understated version of where it all started, Mark. So good. So welcome. It's good to have you. And I should do a bit of a shout out because behind the scenes, I know we've got loads of people from New Zealand, from Australia, from all over watching today. So hi, everyone. And you can, of course, put in any questions into the chat, whatever platform you're on, and we'll make sure we get them to Mark. So Mark, welcome. And I think so a bit of context setting as well. So you're coming to us from beautiful Queenstown at the moment, I think you said as well.
Yes, that's correct.
And you've just got out of isolation, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah, so New Zealand's has been sort of dodging this COVID lockdown for a number of months, but just recently in the last couple of weeks, we've had an outbreak come through our borders. And as a result of that, New Zealand's been in the last 2 weeks of lockdown. And unfortunately, just with my business connections up, I was up in Auckland at the time that was announced, and I was in a location which someone would test positive. So on my return back down to beautiful Queenstown, sat in self-isolation, went through the testing regime, and thankfully 2 negative tests. So come back out of that, and at the same timing, anything south of Auckland's now come out of their status where we're out of lockdown and we can start doing a wee bit more, mobility around the place. So I'm looking forward to a good walk and a run over the next couple of days.
Really makes us remind the simple things in life, doesn't it? I think, and look, obviously everyone here, we're all in various stages, so we completely get it. I think it's a great segue actually into some of the things that we want to unpack with you today, because as Mick and I always say, this show is about digital transformation and technology, yes, but I think we balance that probably 50-50 with the human element, of course, both from a member perspective, from all sorts, right? And just behind the scenes, we were chatting a bit about SBS and the fact that you're a building society. And I think that's a great place to start, because a lot of our viewers probably in Australia won't know much about SBS. And I'd love for you to give us a bit of a feel for the organisation, and also how being a building society and having members really informs some of your digital strategy. So I know there's a lot there, but you'll find somewhere to start there.
Yeah, I can, Alex. I think SBS as a bank is quite unique. It's got over 152 years of history. So, and it really started back in 1869 when there was a gentleman by the name of James Walker Bain, who actually walked from Dunedin, which is about 210 k's north of Invercargill, walked down to Invercargill with this view of setting up a mutual building society to help people into their home ownership, really. And it was at the time when there's challenges where the heydays of the gold rush and so forth had started to slow down, and really people were struggling about as you get into home ownership. So with those foundations, the building society was born. And over the next 152 years, where it's gone through obviously adversity, where it's been depressions or world wars or so forth, it's survived over those 152 years to still really be there for its core purposes, really around helping people into home. So I've been with SBS Bank just over 10 years now, predominantly on the in a risk role. So my background historically has been risk management. But over the last 2.5 years, I've moved across the fence. I guess some people say come from being a gamekeeper into a poacher, but I've jumped sides and really enjoying the member experience piece, which is really looking after our distribution channels and so forth. So SBS also within the group has a number of other entities. So we're actually for a small bank in New Zealand, so we're just over 5 billion in assets. But for a small bank, we actually quite a strong and diverse full banking offering. So we have a wealth management business where we do our Kiwi Saver scheme, which is actually helping to save for retirement, and obviously funds management. We have an insurance business as well, which we provide insurance, and then we have a finance company as well, which is provides consumer finance, motor vehicle finance, and so forth. So a reasonably big group of a business, so reasonably complex for a small scale, but really good there to support all our members for all their needs.
And Mark, you've got, as you say, that it's such an icon of a business, SBS, the group more broadly. In terms of, I just want to pull on one thread on the member base, because that's fundamentally the difference between the customer-owned organisations, which SBS falls under, versus an ordinary shareholder organisation or a bank, so to speak. How do you guys approach that? What do you think are some of the differences in being a member-owned organisation versus a bank, and how do you use the members to help inform your decision making when it comes to serving the members?
Yeah, really good question, Mick, because it is fundamentally different. As I said earlier, my background, and you talked about, was being overseas, working for very much shareholder-driven organisations, investment banking, very much around the bottom line driver and so forth. Where we're under Mutual, it was really refreshing coming back to New Zealand and joining SBS, and at the centre of everything we do is our members, because our members are our owners. So it's no use being aggressive and taking margin and profitability off a member in one hand. In reality, all that is doing is returning equity back to them and the other hand, because they actually own the organisation. So sort of centre to everything we do is the member mix. So and that's really fundamental, whether it's around product design or whether it's around our distribution model, or whether it's around the channels that we're using or our digital transformation that we've been working through. We need to engage the members to ensure that we are understanding what their needs are and ensure that we're delivering value for the member. So quite different from my experience of working for an investment bank where it's was a slightly short-term focus and very much focused on bottom line.
Can I ask a follow-up, Alex, just quickly? Apologies. And that comes through in terms of customer advocacy and also customer satisfaction and something that SBS obviously prides itself on doing exceptionally well, and a number of your peers do really, really well here relative to the shareholder-driven organisations, which I think credit and kudos to you guys. In terms of trends, I just want to ask a question around what you've seen over the last 18 months or 2 years in particular, given what's happened with the pandemic. Have you seen a shift in terms of the way consumers have wanted to engage, or your members have wanted to engage with the bank? And then how have you made adjustments, or how do you accommodate for that?
Yeah, definitely. There has been a shift, in regard to how customers or members are engaging, and a stronger uptake on digital. So maybe to give a bit of context to that, Mick, if I go back to our digital strategy, or what we've been focusing on as an organisation, we're still here to provide members choice of channel. Yeah, we're not solely focused on driving business down to one channel, because end of the day, our members need choice, and we're there to provide the financial products and services for our members. Over the last 5 years, we've been in a situation where we've been playing a bit of catch up. So our digital offering, I would say, was suboptimal 5-6 years ago. We had a strategy and principle that let's build things ourselves and let's bolt it onto our core banking system. And we realised very quickly that the speed of change in technology, the speed of change which was happening with our competitors, we're going to get left well behind if we continue down that route. So we made a fundamental change in strategy where we decided that we need to build an architecture where we can partner with other providers where this is their core business, and to be able to bring those partnerships and those offerings back to our members to be able to provide those hygiene services that they're expecting, given the banking industry and the banking dynamic. And so over the last 4 years, we've been really building that hygiene capability. So pretty much everything that you can do in our branches now you can do through our digital channels, with one exception where we're just closing that last hygiene gap. And that's given us a real clear change around how our members are engaging. So our teams are very good around our strategy of working with members, educating. So we've got a full digital inclusion strategy about bringing our members changing, who would have walked in, talked about their grandchildren, had a nice cup of tea with us, now that they're now feeling confident enough to engage with us digitally and do their banking needs digitally. And so we're seeing a change in the nature of, I guess, transaction that we're doing within our branch network relative to what we're doing online. So our branch network are now more around advice and more value-add transactions that are happening. So yeah, quite a fundamental shift, and that's been accelerated particularly over the last 18 months with COVID, and also there's been some changes in the New Zealand market around removal of checks and things like that. So that's been a driver for some of that change in behaviour.
So interesting, isn't it, Mark? Because what you're describing there, and I want to come back to the partnering piece as well, because I think a lot of our audience, they're all in different throes of transformation and tech projects and all sorts of things. And I think this is one of the fundamental questions for organisations around, do you do it yourself or do you partner with experts in the field? So I do want to come back to that. But I just think it's really interesting what you're describing around the member experience and the way you're engaging your members, and that beautiful example, which is so true, about, well, I used to come into a branch and have a cup of tea and talk about the grandkids or what was happening, because in the context of where we are, this human connection and interaction is so important still. So can you tell us a bit more about what is the difference in transactions from the digital to actually what happens in the branch network now? Like, how are your teams making sure that's one experience for the customers so they don't lose that human interaction?
Yeah, really good question, Alex. Members are moving at different pace as well. So there is some I won't stereotype it, some of our new membership-based customer base are very comfortable with actually not ever going into the branch. Yeah, and they're using our video conferencing capability to get that more value-added advice rather than actually physically coming to the branch. When some of our other members are still very, very conscious that some of these types of transactions, they want to look someone in the whites in the eyes. Yeah, they want to have am I talking to someone who's actually going to give me the right advice? Am I comfortable with that person? So we need to cater for both. Yeah, and that's the key thing that as SBS as a mutual is we want to give our members choice of which channel they engage in, and then for our team members, I guess it's around making sure that experience is. If someone used to come into the branch and they're getting a really personalised, authentic service, how are we replicating that through our digital offerings? And what we've been working on very, very closely over the last 5 or 6 years is really building that hygiene base. And now we're just laying over the customer experience piece, which is actually what our point of difference is. We were SBS was the won the banking customer satisfaction award for Canstar last year. So our members love us. Yeah, they're strong advocates for us and so forth. But as that dynamic changes, they start using digital channels. How can we ensure that we don't lose that uniqueness and that point of difference? And that's the experience that we're sort of building in, and that's where it's so important to be engaging with members to understand what they want and make sure we're solving their problems that they're looking for to be solved.
Can I ask a quick follow-up, Mick, just on that? And I'm nodding, Mark, because it's so interesting and it's so true. And you beat me to it because I was going to ask you, in what can be quite a transactional field, banking, it can be quite, transactional, but it's those unique points of difference and why someone chooses you, right? But I was just going to ask you then, it'd be really interesting for our audience if you can just sort of talk to us a bit about what are some of the things that you do internally to make sure that you do keep the member at the center of those decisions and those experiences? Because it's a discipline, I think. You've got to keep reminding yourself. You don't just say, well, we're a mutual, so that just happens. It doesn't just happen. You've got to keep that discipline to make sure that you don't suddenly have internal decision-making committees without engaging that member. I feel like that's quite hard to do well. So are there some things that you could share about what you and your team do to make sure that you don't miss on that?
Yeah, it starts at the top, so it starts around our executive table. So around our table, we all wear different hats. So some people are looking at the commercial elements of certain things, where I'm constantly there saying, how's this going to meet our members? So looking at it from our members' lens. So and we got to one stage where we're actually having a doll of a member sitting at the table, so we can ensure that member's voice was constantly at front of our mind of whatever we're doing from a decision point of view, a design perspective point of view. And then when it gets down to the next level, whether it's, as I said, whether it's product designed or whether it's some of the digital changes that we're making, we ensure that we don't, whether it's the executive or the next level down, don't just believe we know what the members want. We actually engage with them and ensure we get their voice. So whether it's through customer labs or whether it's actually prototyping stuff up and existing members and new to bank members, and ensuring that lens comes through very strongly before we actually then push the green light to proceed on something. Because there's a danger that if we don't have that diversity of engagement of our membership base, they can get very narrow in our thinking, which is just representative of the key decision makers, and that's quite key for us to bring that diversity of thought and that diversity of interaction into those key decisions.
I'm going to jump in because I think Alex has got many questions, as we both do. If you think back through time, there's been some major changes in terms of what's happened on how product offerings, value propositions have evolved over time. For example, go back to when mobile banking came into play, via phones, so to speak. What do you think might be the next big move in terms of how technology may enable customers to be able to meet their demands? What's your prediction?
Yeah, well, there's there's a lot happening in the AI space, yeah. So it's around using data to ensure that, as I said, that personalised service and offering is there at the time when the member needs it or before they actually believe they need it. So I think that's the key, is the data and using some of the AI technology to be able to serve up at the right time things that are going to meet members' needs. So I think that's probably a key one for us, and that's been an area we've been focusing on as an organisation, because key to all that data is being main bank and understanding the transactional offering, or being able to complement the data that we have internally with actually external data to actually then work out what members are needing and being able to offer those services. So that's probably a key area, Mick. Open banking is not mature in New Zealand yet, so it's just initial thinking happening at this stage. But I think that's also going to really open up the ability to provide products and services with understanding a full relationship, which may be multi-banked or bank and fintechs and so forth, or other challenger banks coming into the market, and to be able to serve up a holistic view of your financial needs and then to serve up the right products and services for them.
And maybe just one more question. In terms, we've seen a lot happen in the actual payments landscape. That's been really interesting. Certainly the advent of buy now, pay later, and the recent acquisition of Afterpay by Square. What do you think might be, again, in this space, because we're seeing so much competition and it's really created a wonderful customer experience. How do you think, or how do you see banks, evolving their offerings to be able to support or coordinate with payment providers to offer a better or a more cohesive service moving forward?
Yeah, I think it does come down to that partnering piece. So I think banks traditionally have been a wee bit protective of their patch in that payment space, and I think if we're the custodians of the accounts and so forth, but in reality, if we don't open up, then we're going to be worked around. So whether it's through telcos or through others, so quite important for us. And as a smaller scale bank, we don't probably have as much skin in the game as some of the larger institutions in New Zealand or in Australasia in that space. So we're very, very keen to be able to do that partnering piece, because I think there's an opportunity for us to steal the march on a couple of competitors in that space. So that's where we see that the role of the bank will be still the custodian of the account, Mick, but very much open to the different payment channels, because that's obviously a need that the consumer or our members are requiring, and that we will need to fulfil.
It's a very different mindset, isn't it? And you've spoken a few times already, Mark. You've used, I think, the word diversity quite a few times in different ways, and inclusion, and like digital inclusion and diversity of thought. And, just what we were saying before about partnering, I think it's a really interesting mindset shift, isn't it? Because you can have that either closed mind of, hey, no, we're going to do everything, and it's be that defensive play, which, as you said, is not for the future, and it doesn't serve members, it doesn't serve customers, but also you're going to lose playing that game. I'd love to get a bit more, because you've worked in some really interesting places in your career as well. And I'd love to know a bit more about how those experiences informed, I guess, where you are now in terms of the role that you play, your leadership style, talking about diversity of other cultures. Are there things that you've brought from some of those other experiences?
Yeah, no, definitely, Alex. So I had very much a privilege of working internationally for 15 years, and spent a lot of time in London, and then I worked initially with Deloitte, and then I joined ABN AMRO Bank, and I was part of a business unit management team there, which was fundamentally, I guess, looking at the operating model of the organisation, particularly the wholesale banking side division of the organisation. And it went very much from a geographic country Pacific model to we went into a regional model, and then we went into an offshoring model. So we end up putting 5,000 jobs out into India, creating centres of excellence and so forth. So and that gave me really tremendous opportunity to engage with different cultures, to spend time out in India, spend time when I was in Singapore, and all those have, I guess, helped shape, I guess, my openness to what different ways of looking to do things and so forth. And one of the strengths we do have at SBS, and particularly part of the executive team at the moment, I'm very lucky to work with colleagues who have also had similar experiences. So they haven't just traditionally come from the retail banking game in New Zealand. They've all had offshore experience and very much open to different ways of challenging the way we do things, particularly given our size and scale and particularly in the competitive nature of this industry.
And in terms of, I might go back to a question around, running transformation programs without disclosing, trade secrets by any stretch of the imagination. We've heard from different leaders who have gone through this process of helping to support their people, obviously to then implement systems and learn new skills and really be able to support their organisation more broadly. How do you, when you think about transformation programs, what are the important factors, be it customer, be it people, be it system, be it process, in terms of bringing it all together to make it to be ultimately that success for the organisation and in the end for the end user, the customer? Yeah,
I think it all starts being really clear what we're trying to achieve. Yeah, so being very clear on that purpose and communicating that in a very clear and concise way, because banking, a lot of people in banking want to overcomplicate things. Yeah, it's still relatively a simple industry that we provide, and I think with all the acronyms and jargon that people put in there, we do confuse things. So I think it starts with being very, very clear of what we're trying to achieve, Mick, and then it's about understanding the different elements of that outcome you're trying to achieve and what the key stakeholders are. And as we've talked about, member is so crucial to us as an organisation. So that early engagement with our member, getting that lens onto it to ensure that's going to, it's no use delivering and building a great project and delivering it on time and delivering on budget and no one's using it. Yeah, so it's really making sure that we get that early engagement with our members to what we're doing. And then in an organisation which has been in existence for 152 odd years, there's layers and layers and layers of legacy process and so forth. So it's actually just peeling that back and saying, okay, from a fresh blank page, how would we actually achieve this rather than incrementally building on and then switching things off and obviously or streamlining existing integration points or processes we've got in place. And then finally, the success of SBS is its people. Yeah, so it's around that personalised, authentic service, which our people do such a great job on it. So we've got to take our people on that journey. So it's really around change management with our people, the mindset, so keeping them prepared and openness for change and the reasons why, and giving them the context for that, and then subsequently give them the right support through that change for them to, I guess, learn, evolve as well, so they're in a strong position to provide whatever that change is to our members.
I love that you and there are so many things to this, I know, but I love that you talked about you were talking about your people then, Mark, because, and Mick knows, like we can't help ourselves. We always come, to the people, right? So there's so much to what you just said, because even when you just said, I think before, to paraphrase, you said, we've got to approach this with, we've got so much legacy, but also the responsibility of that legacy. Yeah. And that's a lot. And it's actually quite challenging not to look at the picture in front of you and try and tinker around the edges, to actually come with a blank page of a piece of paper view is actually quite like you've got to make space for that, for your people to be able to look at it that way and have the time, because the obvious solution is probably to tinker. So I'd love you to talk a bit more about, how do you bring your people along? They're such an important part of the bank, of the service, the culture. How do you make space for these sorts of things as a leader in the organisation with your teams?
Yeah, and as I said, it's down to engagement with your people. So it's around ensuring that they have input into it. One of the reasons why we do partner is we are not going to come up with the best ideas in the world. Yeah, so we're a small scale, so we need to bring through that innovation with partners. Yes, we have concepts, we have direction that we want to head to. So, but ultimately, the how some of that's going to be delivered and so forth is with third parties or partners. Then subsequently, you've got to have the organisation knowledge to say how's that going to fit, and that's where our people and our SMEs are so crucial to that process. So good partnerships, good dialogue, and then subsequently, I think with our people is getting them into the mindset of, just because we've done it this way, why are we doing that? What's the challenge around? What's the value that's giving? So if we did it this way or that way, is that going to give a better outcome? And I think it's as simple as that, because ultimately all our people are here for our members. So they're not going to stand in the way if there's going to be a better outcome to get for our members. So I think it just really starts down from that top-down culture of being a member-owned organisation, and whether I'm a processing a loan in the back office, or whether I'm a financial accountant doing the monthly reports. Ultimately, we're all here for our members, and that's really a strong DNA thread that's through our organisation, through our culture, and that's been built up not in the last 3 years, 5 years. That's been built up over 152 years.
And banking and financial services. Look, I think our listeners know this, but Alex and I love the category, and banking to me is so exciting. And a lot of people think it might be a bit dry or bland, but there's so much to it, and there's so many different stakeholders, and it's so important to society that banks are strong, they're performing really well, they're supporting their citizens. What role or how do you guys engage, given that you've got a very important regulator, they play a critical role in the New Zealand market? How do you guys go about engaging with the regulators to support, mutually beneficial outcomes for your members, your customers, and more broadly for, the landscape over in New Zealand? Yeah,
our relationship with the regulators is really strong. Right? So it's gone back in 2008. We were the first building society to hold a registered banking license, and that really came back from our passion as an organisation. Our board at the time went and sat down with the Reserve Bank governor at the time and said, okay, we think this is the next step for us as a organisation to grow. And off the back of that, they supported us through that banking registration. And then subsequently, over the years, as regulatory, maturities increase and oversight has had to increase as a result of whether it's financial crises or whether it's conduct issues or so forth. Throughout that process, we've really retained a very open, transparent, and strong relationship with our regulators. And we got to be balanced. That you don't want your regulator to be running your business, but at the same side, you need your regulator to be supporting you with your business and your direction. And I think that engagement from board down through to executive and even our key regulatory compliance people have been crucial to build that open relationship and that trust with each other.
Great question, Mick, and I think so true. And I was just going to say, you beat me to it, Mark, but it's based on trust and transparency. All these relationships, right, with different stakeholders, hugely important. I wanted to ask you something just a bit different, but I know our viewers will really love to hear from you. So you also hold director roles, and it's quite different from being an executive on many, many levels. It'd be great just to hear a bit about, one, what you love about, being a director, but also how do you, adjust for that quite different responsibility and role that you're playing in a different context? Because I know a lot of our members are kind of on the cusp of exploring, that part of their career, so I think it'd be really interesting to hear from you about that experience.
Yeah, really good question, because it is very different. Yeah, so in a executive management role, you are into the detail. You are got accountability for ensuring you get the outcomes. So at a governance role, you're there to support the CEO or management in regard to the direction, the strategy, and to ensure that they've got the right investment and support behind it. So I sit on our finance now company, which is a 100% owned subsidiary of SBS Group, and a very successful business, which two gentlemen started from back in the early 2000s from their kitchen table to be a really dominant finance company in the New Zealand market. So a great story. And part of it is one of the gentlemen who were involved back in the kitchen table discussion is now still the CEO of that business. So the passion, the history that he's put into the organisation, the sweat and the bloods, and he knows all the detail of the organisation. So it's about trust, but it's also about challenging them about, okay, where's the market heading? Where's the opportunities in the market? As a board, how can we support you to maximise some of those opportunities? So yeah, very, very different dynamic from me sitting there, coming to my board and presenting business case or paper, and being on the receiving end of those questions versus actually there trying to support a CEO to those questions. So yeah, and I'm very lucky to have that opportunity to be able to do both.
In terms of, might stay on this topic, there was a recent article in the Australian Financial Review, which is one of the main financial press platforms here in Australia, and it was talking about, they reviewed and researched and studied the boards within, particularly the banks, the ASX listed banks here, and what they found was that there was an underrepresentation of IT expertise from their directors. What's it like over, I guess, just broadly speaking, in terms of, the strategy to support executives and bring up that level of capability in having exposure and expertise in technology to ensure that you've got that level of sophistication across the board more broadly? What are your people strategies to ensure that succession planning is happening?
Yeah, I think the New Zealand market will be very similar to the Australian market in that perspective, Mick. So really strong IT capability at a governance level is very, it's not there yet. So the market is very thin in that space. So as an organisation, we have recognised that ourselves, and we have, like most governments, we have an IT committee, and we've complemented that IT committee with some external capability to assist our directors in regard to that I guess transformation and strategy and where the future is happening for IT. So I think first it's identifying, have you got that gap, and if you have got that gap, how can you actually complement and fulfill that gap? And as said, it's a tough market because those individuals are highly regarded and highly sought after. So there's other ways, whether they're not full onto a board governance level, that you can actually bring that expertise and that capability in to support the governance level.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? But hugely important as well. Mark, I said to you at the start, this is going to go fast, and Mick and I say this every time. And I'm sure, Mick, you've got probably a final question you want to ask Mark before we do run out of time. But Mark, I'd love to talk. I know we did promise you a very organic conversation, which our viewers are very used to. But from your own personal career, it'd be great to get a feel from you about who's really been an important influence in your career journey, career or life, because we talk a lot in our community about the importance of intentional networks, about mentors, and the people that kind of, they're the ones that either give you the first opportunity, or they support you, or they push you forward, or they see talent in you. And it'd be great to hear your perspective of maybe a couple of people that have been mentors or influences to you in your career in that way.
Yeah, no, good question. So I guess I'd start initially back in my family. So my first job when I was still at school was working in the family business, which was a wool store. So we used to buy wool from the farmers and then bulk it up and then get it through, wash it through a scour and so forth. And that business was set up for my grandfather. And so he was a very determined, very strong businessman, but his word was his word. Yeah, so he didn't need signatures, a handshake and his word, and so the integrity, I guess, the trust you had in it. So his values was work hard, be very transparent, clear, and make sure that you still have friends outside of business deals. So through that probably put some values into me around work ethic. And then when I went overseas, I had the opportunity to work under some really great leaders. Yeah, but there's a gentleman, as I was, I guess, a young New Zealander trying to cut its teeth in the UK market and big investment bank, and you realise that there's plenty of opportunity and steps to get up. So I was reasonably ambitious at my time, and this gentleman, which I end up nicknaming the Owl, a wise old man, sort of just was very careful about what speed I went through my promotions through the organisation. He didn't want to expose me too early where I could actually do some damage or fill to myself, my own reputation and so forth. So he was very supportive through my early days in the investment banking. And then in my latter part of that career over in the Netherlands, I had the opportunity to work for a gentleman who was the acting managing director and CFO of ABN AMRO Group, and that was going through quite a significant breakup. So it was being taken over by a consortium, and through that process of having to deal with the GFC, Dutch regulators, UK regulators, at the same time of having three consortium members who were looking to break up a 110,000 employee organisation, he was sort of responsible for, I guess, leading me to assist him through that transformation. So, and each of them had different values and different styles of leadership, which you take the best out of and try and bring to the table for how you lead your team. Yeah, so been very lucky with my career from the leaders I've worked through, Alex.
Final question, not business related. Who's going to win the New Zealand Rugby Union competition this year?
Well, being from down the southern end of the South Island, it will have to be the Highlanders, Mick. So we're the banking partner for the Highlanders, so I couldn't go any further astray than support them. But probably more importantly, Mick, who's going to win on Sunday in the final Bledisloe Cup game?
Oh, you're better placed to answer that question.
I can't believe we left the most hard-hitting questions to like the final moments of the interview. It was inevitable.
Yes, it was.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I feel like we could just keep chatting. We did tell you it would be a free-ranging chat, but thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. And we've covered, as we always do, so many different topics. So thank you for your time. And everyone who's watching, I miss seeing your faces, but I know you're all out there. Thank you for joining us for another episode of A Digital First, a banking transformation series. And thank you, Mick, as always, my favourite co-host.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Alex.
See everyone soon.
Very enjoyable. Thank you.